So welcome everybody to this webinar. We're looking at the CDR, the core data record, and this is a 101 webinar. So if you're new to the topic, new to the subject, or just want to have a refresh, then this is the place to find out everything you need to know. I'm joined today by Kirsten Duffield, who's the CEO of Morning Data, but importantly is the technical advisor to the chair of the Data Council, and also chairs and co-chairs a number of the CDR working groups. So welcome, Kirsten.
Thank you, Jeremy. Nice to be here.
So let's start with the basics if we can. So the core data record, the CDR, if you can just give us a kind of overview of its kind of central focus and purpose and how it sits in kind of London Market's digital transformation program.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's not as new as people think. So that's the first thing. And we had the Common Core record back as far as the 1990s. So we as a market have been hovering and circling around the whole idea of having non-competitive data that can be transmitted between parties. And that enables us to leverage a variety of things. But the reason why the CDR really came into existence this time, so to speak, or has sort of gathered speed and emphasis, is because of the change at Velinetic of technology stack and all of the elements that are going to be part of that transformation. So if we consider the fact that in order to reduce those frictional costs and in order to have some more straight through processing, and that doesn't mean 100% straight through processing, it means that we need to make inroads into this cost. We need to have some parameters and we need to have some guardrails that means that pieces of data can move between parties and then onto the Bureau for settlement.
Okay, so how does that CDR kind of help kind of the traditional data processes? So you were talking then about kind of enabling straight through processes where appropriate, but perhaps you can give us a bit more about how it can kind of improve accuracy, consistency, efficiency. How does it play into those kind of areas?
Absolutely. It's one of those things where we've almost leapfrogged the basics. We've become so acutely aware in the market of moving things around digitally, but in fact, digitally isn't necessarily always data. So we're happy to move emails around, for example. We're happy to move databases around. We're happy to move spreadsheets around. But in there, yes, there is data, but two spreadsheets don't necessarily mean that you can understand the context of the data that is in them. We know that we need column headings. We know that we need to understand what those column headings mean. If somebody says country, well, we could put in the United Kingdom, we could put in UK, we could put in GB, but we don't actually also know what the country field refers to. So when we're trying to give context together with the individual data points, this enables so many more of those exciting, far more exciting elements of the London market to take place. We could start sharing data amongst participants where we all understand the context of each data point. We could reduce the costs of rekeying and having endless numbers of people taking things from what is effectively a printed document. It might be a PDF, but it's still a printed document, and rekeying it into multiple systems. And we could also consider the fact that if we wanted to leverage some of the automation that the market has been investing so heavily in, then things like doing auto follow at a placing platform really only works if you have got consistent, reliable and shareable data. So all of the exciting stuff that people talk about, all of those transformation projects in each of the carriers and brokers across the market really only work if they're based on a certain level of reliable, predictable and consistent data. And that's the crux of it at the end of the day. we're quite happy to use standards in our everyday life. We know that we drive on the left in this country. We have certain standards for weights and measures. Doesn't mean we always have to be in miles or only have to be in kilometers. There is transformation between, there is mapping between, but we don't have 150 different measuring standards. So this is where this market can leverage understanding and accepting that standards and data are nothing to be frightened of. They're things that we deal with day in, day out in everything that we do.
How linked is the kind of the core data record and the subjects that you've just been talking about to the Blueprint 2 initiative? Because I think there's some confusion about how interlinked they are and or not. Could you just kind of clarify that for us?
Yes. Blueprint 2 is obviously a brand for a project, for a transformation. It becomes a sort of household name almost. And if there are any challenges that are experienced that need to move timelines, etc., then of course there's a good portion of the market that wants to jump on the sort of critical path of looking at things not happening, as well as some who are happy to look at the progress that we've made. But the core data record really was originally sort of revitalized. It was given energy in association with Blueprint 2 because that digital transformation of the London market can't really work without common data, without that non-competitive data, without knowing the context and the business rules of why we have to supply certain data points. But it doesn't mean that you need to wait for Blueprint 2 to do a core data record. It might mean that the destination of the ultimate CDR into the bureau is needing to wait for a system that can receive it. But if we think about how we transmit data between parties before it goes anywhere near the bureau, when we just want to transmit data to and from a placing platform, or to take a leaf out of the Rushicon initiative from peer to peer. How is it that we can do that? Well, we can do that by agreeing that certain data points have certain context, business rules. They appear, perhaps, you need to do a layer reference on an excess of loss policy, but you don't need to do that on a proportional treaty. So they're very basic, straightforward expectations, but they are expressed in a way where vendors, brokers, in-house technical teams, carriers, TPAs, everybody can now agree that an apple is an apple. And that's the real benefit of this, that we're not all trying to create a sort of fruit punch out of the data that we're sending around the market.
Yeah, understood. So pretty clear now on kind of what the CDR is, what its objectives are, and what where the benefits are going forward. Where do you see kind of the biggest challenges in kind of collating and standardizing data, and what steps, I suppose, should organizations be thinking about in order to be ready for kind of market-wide use of the CDR?
Well, I think the first thing is they don't need to wait. You're probably already doing a great deal of this in every organisation. It's probably pretty accepted that a policy on a system somewhere has an inception date and an expiry date. It will probably have a UMR. It will have some details about the policyholder. It will have details about the capacity providers if you are a broker collecting this data. All we're talking about is streamlining that so that we're collecting things in a consistent way. So, for example, an address, instead of having it all in one field as just a string of text, dividing it down into the component parts, including a zip code, a country, a state, etc., allows for geoplotting to take place. So we could be looking at our existing systems and our existing data warehouses and starting to clean up that kind of data. So the first thing that we would be looking at is, why not look at the global standards that are in your data? So country codes, for example, they're an easy win. If you have got UK littered all over your systems, change them to GB. because that's the ISO code. If you're not recording which state it's in, then start recording that. If you're recording it as a piece of text, then turn it and allow it to be selected as a state code, for example. Those things are easy wins at global level. Then we come down into perhaps the industry standards. So looking at the Accord code lists, if you're an Accord member, getting those embedded. It means that the apple is expressed in a certain way and interpreted the other end in exactly the same way. That's something everyone can be doing now. And it allows different systems in one organization to now be able to exchange data on a better platform, let alone the ability to then share it outside the organization. So that's a quick win people can start with now. And using the CDR as the guardrails means you now have a rule book that you can actually look at and say, actually, somebody else has done the hard work here. Somebody else has told me these are the reference lists I should be using for these purposes. So that's an easy win.
So it sounds to me almost like a bit of a mindset change, just in terms of the way that people are thinking about the data. And as you say, having the guardrails and that kind of reference book, if you know what things are.
I think the interesting thing is we're very used to dealing with a document, and the market has moved on in the last 5, maybe longer number of years, especially post-pandemic or during the pandemic. We're much more data savvy. We're much more data aware. But I mean, no one would think it would be odd that PayPal and Amazon can't communicate with each other. And so therefore, this is the journey we are on. So there's a mindset change between the document purely being an A4 piece of paper, digital or otherwise, and also the expense and the energy put into only extracting data from a document rather than thinking data first. Not exclusively. Some circumstances, some use cases mean that that's just physically not possible. And so the document is the source of the data, and that's an unfortunate byproduct. But if we collect data correctly at the beginning, you have to put your tax return in a data form. Starts off as a nice paper form you had to fill out, but that was because they needed to read it. Now you can only do it online. We're very used to this in everything we do. This industry should be doing nothing different from what we experience in our everyday lives.
Great. Thank you ever so much, Kirsten, for giving us that kind of 101 guide to the CDR. We'll be picking this up at the Data Jam in your session there, and we'll be kind of deep diving now into kind of what it means for organizations and how we actually make that happen, and getting some practical, I guess, case studies about what works and what doesn't. So, but for now, thanks ever so much for joining us on this webinar, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jeremy.